Everyone, welcome again to another Peaceful Solution Character Education Certification course. Everyone in the auditorium can be seated. And of course, welcome all of you that are watching online. Once again, we're going to be picking up here in our responsibility units where we left off last class. Of course, we left off on page 58. We're in the number 5 of a series of 5, already going through the character, then the acceptance, the self-control, the respect, and now into the responsibility. And of course, tonight we're hoping to conclude this chapter, chapter 3, and move into chapter 4 with the next class. We'll hopefully get through the whole chapter tonight. That way Katan can pick up with chapter 4. But if you look over here to page 59, we won't do much of a review right now because tonight's class, pretty much after page 59, is a review of the whole chapter. So we'll get into the review after we finish through page 59. But put your hand or your finger there and turn back over with your finger on page 59, and then look to LP, Lesson Plan 3, page E. That's your grade tab page there that has your lesson plan. And of course, page 59 is not mentioned in the lesson plan, but if you look at procedure 9, it tells us to conclude with page 60. So obviously, we're going to have to put page 59 there in with procedure 8. If you notice at the very end, it says have students read section You too can say no, found on page 58, and then it jumps to page 60. So keeping in mind, and that's just an example how some pages aren't mentioned, but we need to cover them before going on to the next procedure. So going back over here to page 59, and of course we were talking about in the last class how was actually the last few classes and really many classes before that, but really going through in this responsibility unit how we're responsible for what we do and don't do, and how if we're going to stand against negative conformity, negative peer pressure, we really have to take a stance to where we, as it said, firmly say no when someone asks you to do something, not kind of jokingly, but firmly stand your ground. Not like aggressively where you put your hands up and you're ready to go for it, but no, let it be known that you're not willing to compromise your character or your health, as we've talked about. And that's where we're going to really start tonight with this section, last but not least. And beginning here, it says, as you grow physically, you have an obligation to yourself to develop mentally as well. Now that's really important because mentally doesn't mean just maturity. Also think of all of the things we've covered so far, especially with the heart of the matter, and the things we can do that will break us down mentally, literally affect us on a level from disease and sickness and things that we bring on ourselves, the things that we can really pollute our bodies with. It's like taking the trash and putting it inside of our bodies when our bodies should be removing things that can't help us. We should actually be making ourselves better with better choices and of course living healthy lives. But when we don't do those things, we don't only affect ourselves, as we were talking about, cancer evolves from something. And William talked about how the STDs, it leads into, as we talked about, cervical cancer or oral cancer, many different kinds of cancers. And starts off as HPV, and this is very well known in the scientific community. Anybody can go online and read about it. It's very important for teachers to educate their students on these things because you can also see how these diseases affect the brain, even when lying dormant. And why is it so important that we continually mention this? Well, here in the state of Texas, they're still having an enormous surge of syphilis. And the physicians are still saying they're afraid no one's going to take this serious. They're saying they're out of antibiotic or they don't have nowhere near enough to treat the enormous amount of cases that are developing. And of course, when you have widespread cases and people are not adhering to the warning, they just keep spreading. In fact, they keep spreading more and more. It's the old adage, and it'd probably be really beneficial to your classroom if you show them how things multiply very quickly. As when you have 2 pennies is how we've done it before in classrooms. And those 2 pennies, of course, connect another penny to those. And then you have 4 pennies, and then connect 4 pennies to those. And then you have 8 pennies, and then connect 8 pennies to those. You have 16. And it starts showing how disease can spread out very quickly. In fact, the longer it goes, as we've seen with COVID, it can actually get out of hand to where people start shutting, governments start shutting, cities down, states down, and countries down. And one thing that we have to remember is with the control or lack of control of these diseases that are being spread right now, it's literally due to just that, a lack of control. But we haven't seen the mental damage that it's done yet. We're going to. You know, you get a great example this last week when you see a man from San Antonio here in Texas go all the way to the embassy in Washington, D.C. and set himself on fire. You know, that's not normal. It makes you wonder. And obviously, anybody that's ever read anything in history, you make the news for a day, and a week after that, no one remembers your name. It doesn't really do much as far as getting things accomplished. So you have to really think what was in a person's mind to think that this was going to be sufficient. You know, if you think about Tiananmen Square back in the 80s in China, where I remember watching the news and watching people get ran over with tanks right there on the news in Tiananmen Square. I can remember it in my mind. The stance and the actual reasoning behind it, I have to re-educate myself on. I have to go back and read it when I want to know those things. But the people that lost their lives, I don't remember what their faces look like or their names, nor did they accomplish their goal that they were seeking to achieve at that time. So once again, as we grow physically, we have an obligation to ourselves to develop mentally as well, and to continuously seek ways to develop and improve your character or our character. So we should always be working on that. It's never a moment that goes by that we should take a break from doing what's right. Another way you can do this is by gaining the most education you can. Don't take school lightly and play around, watch TV, or hang out with friends when you should be studying. You know, it's only when you're in school that you don't think about these things. When you're in school, you don't really realize how much the education is important to you and the things that you're getting that you can apply. It's only after you're out of school and you realize, man, I don't have all day anymore to learn. I actually got to get out and get a job. I got to work now. You know, I don't get to spend the whole day being educated while someone else is helping me take care of my living. And of course, when you think about going to college, sadly, most people go to college and it's almost like they go for the party, and the education is just something you got to do so the parents can pay for the party. And that's what it becomes like. Just talking to a teacher today that retired from the Abilene school districts here in the city of Abilene, which is a little bit down the road from us. And they were saying the reason they quit was due to the just uncontrollable disrespect from students. And this woman had been teaching for 28 years, and she said it was starting to mentally break her down. She couldn't deal with it anymore. It was just too much. And that every student was out of control. And she gave us an example that last year, it was actually this school year. Last year is in 2023, but this school year, that one day, because of the disrespect, 10 teachers didn't show up to school and they had no substitutes. That's how much the teachers didn't want to deal with it. So you had 10 classes that were left unattended. You know, and I asked, would you send them to the gymnasium? What do you do? And she didn't really say. She said, I don't know. I'm out of that. I can't deal with it anymore. You know, and this is a woman that she said the love of my life was teaching. But I never thought, you know, I would have students call me the B word and other words and just totally disrespect me. And you call the parents in, and the parents will treat you the same way. And that's what we see in society, you know, and that's not normal. That's a part of a mental defect. Well, continuing on here, speaking of school and education, it says oftentimes school is treated as a big social club where people go to hang out, kick back, meet a few friends, and chill. Keep in mind that the purpose of school is to become educated. And that's very important for everyone. That's the whole purpose. You know, we have actually in Peaceful Solution headquarters, we offer tutorial services. Now, of course, everybody in the state of Texas, we have a wide variety of things that can be done for education. And of course, it's up to the parents to make sure their children are enrolled in these homeschool programs if that's what they choose. But we actually have a tutorial service to actually help children to become educated, to have interaction, but also to develop these abilities that are needed. And of course, in doing so, you can have fun. But the whole purpose of going to school is education. Not to hang out, not to go play on the playground, not to go to the gym. It's for education. That's the whole purpose. Now, notice it says this is not to say that you shouldn't have fun at school. In fact, learning and discovering new things are fun. But fun should be a part of learning, and learning should never be neglected to have fun. So, extremely important to remember that. When done properly, when the focus is there, when the ideology that needs to be developed inside of a student, learning should be fun. It should be something that you enjoy. Now, there's some subjects you might not always enjoy. When I was in school, I really enjoyed math. It was something I really enjoyed going to. I know I have a few children, they can't stand math, but I loved it. I also love science, and I've grown to like microbiology a lot more just by having teachers that made it desirable to want to know about microbiology by actually showing things that I never even considered years ago, but they explained it and they show it in a way that you can't help but want to know more, to understand how things work. And of course, that falls on teachers, and that's what character education also is about, is trying to get people to develop the desire to not only hear what the program says. Everybody wants a better life, and everybody wants a change for the better, but to actually get it across that we all need it. It's not for money. It's not for any kind of financial gain. It's just for the betterment of mankind. It's for the betterment of society. Remember that we create a society that is governed by certain rules, and when these rules are implemented, we have morality, a moral society. But when these rules are not implemented, we have immorality. And sadly, it's a lack of this education, because there's more than just reading, writing, and arithmetic. Character education should also be a part of it. But consider here, the next paragraph, consider what it would be like if everyone's focus was on learning and improving themselves. Really consider that. If everyone was truly focused on learning and improving themselves, of course, that also helps others to improve because it creates a better environment. There wouldn't be any time to put others down because they're not up to date on the latest fashion, to cut classes and hang out on the back staircase, or to get into fights because someone rolled his or her eyes at the wrong person. The atmosphere of your school and every other school around our nation would be changed if all students made getting an education and improving their lives a top priority. Well, it's almost like in some schools when you talk to teachers, not only is it not a top priority, it's not even a priority anymore. It's just something you do. It fills your time. And I had one teacher tell us in Laredo, Texas one time that she said, I went from a teacher to a daycare provider. That's pretty much what I do. Parents send their children here so they can go work, and that's all we do is we're daycare providers. It's not even education anymore. And that's very sad when you think about people that went to college for 4 years to get a job teaching, and they're ready to quit their job in 3 years. That's heartbreaking. But of course, once again, notice what we just read there, the atmosphere of your school. Well, the atmosphere of your school, remember we talked about a society can actually be also the school atmosphere, the school in itself as a community. So all of these things break down, and always remember that the society, to have a society that is beneficial, we talked about that in the ripple effect in chapter 5 of the character unit, to have a society that is beneficial, that is something that people desire to be part of, is governed by rules. And of course, it has purpose. It has goals. Well, our school environment, the society of the school, is exactly the same way. And continuing on here, it says, so in addition to all of the other ways that were discussed, in this chapter on being responsible to yourself and getting an education, add getting an education to the list. Becoming an educated person is something you must do for yourself. If you don't have that underlined, make sure to underline that. If you don't get an education, you have absolutely no one to blame but yourself. It's extremely important to realize that we must put forth this effort. No one else can do it for you. And, I should have put the slide in there of the character unit. It's on page 6 of values, where you'll see where, they have the top of the head removed and people pouring things into the head. And it's not that easy. You can't come in here and someone stick a flash drive in your ear or up your nose and we just upload the content right there on the brain. It doesn't work that way. We mankind, men and women, we learn through repetition. Remember the value, imitate, practice we talked about in the character unit. That's how we learn, by making things a habit. And of course, developing these positive character traits and doing things with morality, the application of the rules, that's how we make society better. But no one can do it for us. We have to do it for ourselves. It's something that we must choose. It's not something that's done by force. We have a prison system here in the United States that is failing continually. 2.2 plus now million inmates, recidivism at 76%, and of course it's turned into a money-making business. It's no longer the ideology behind, we call them correctional facilities. But there's many facilities you can go into in the United States and there's no education offered. They say they're for rehabilitation. Well, what are you rehabilitating? Most of those people, because rehabilitation means to return back to what it once was, to return back to itself. Well, that's what got them into prison. It was the lack of education that literally led to these things, a breakdown. And of course, people can say, well, I had someone told me not to steal and someone told me not to do this. But was it the same person telling you not to do drugs as they were doing drugs in front of you? Was it the same person saying, don't ever smoke, it's bad for your health, as they smoke away? Is it someone that was a role model that should have been in that position? Remember, a role model is held to a higher standard. So once again, when we start looking at all of these things, we find society has broken down and this education has not been as important as it should be. It should be in the forefront of not only the mind of a student, but also of the mind of those who are bringing this education. Continuing on, it says, you have to apply yourself to paying attention in class, completing assignments on time, and doing your personal best. And that's all you can do. You put forth your best effort, and that's all that can ever be expected of any of us. Don't be concerned with how well your peers are doing or compare yourself to them, because everyone has different abilities. It's up to you to do the best you can with the abilities you have. And that's, once again, that's what makes everything work, because everyone has different abilities and everyone has different interests. Some people, I like turning on my lights and electricity, but I don't want anything to do with being an electrician. I like being able to go in my house and have a bathroom that works, but I don't want to be a plumber. But I like having those things, and I'm glad there's people that know how to do them, because I want to enjoy them. And the job I do, most people wouldn't consider that. People go in and they sit down in their house and they don't think about their furniture. And to me, that's all I've ever done my whole life, is design and build with construction of furniture. But we all have different things that we do and we contribute to society. And you get into whether it's food and cooks, and it's unlimited, the things that we really get benefits of because other people want to do them, and they want to do them well. And that's what makes them so enjoyable. But continuing on here, it says, don't be concerned with how well your peers are doing, once again, or compare yourselves to them, because everyone has different abilities. And once again, last but not least, it's up to you to do the best you can with the abilities you have. And here at the very bottom, it says, don't confuse being responsible with being boring or uncool. There's nothing boring about having a positive moral character. Now, with that in hand, let's turn over to page 60. Hold your finger there, because we're going to need to go back and read procedure 9. because we're going to conclude the lesson, and it's just like every lesson that's taught in the Peaceful Solution. We always conclude with a what I have learned, and it's specifically about this chapter. Now, there's many things. Someone asked, and this chapter is another one where, yes, you can find things in chapter 1 and chapter 2 that's in the what I have learned section here on page 60, but in reality, you could find things in the character unit, the acceptance unit, the self-control unit, and the respect unit that would go with all of these things. And remember, we're building one piece at a time, one block at a time, and we're trying to build something here that is solidified. It's firm, but it's something we can remember. And we should, with what I have learned, it should just be calling back to remembrance, but we should have all of these other books that might not know the exact page it's on, you might not remember the exact chapter it's in, but that you've went through this and that you can remember the lessons and part of the lessons, that's what really helps bring it all together. So once again here on the lesson plan 3, page E, procedure 9, conclude the lesson by having students read the section, What I Have Learned, found on page 60. Encourage students to make responsible choices by accepting the guidance and correction of those in authority, resisting negative peer pressure, and controlling their emotions. So once again, looking over here to page 60, the What I Have Learned section, and there's a lot of things you could add to this here, but we want to just cover in this chapter, looking at the very first point here. It says, although I'm growing up, I must still ask permission from my parents or guardians. And that's one of the things we started out with on page 42. If you look back over to page 42, there's a lot of this that goes together. And of course, on page 42, we started out with chapter 3, I have a responsibility to myself. And if you don't have a note here, it's always best to tie this together to chapter 2 of the respect unit, which was about self-respect. It helps bring these things two together because it talks about how you are the one that has to be responsible for these things. So chapter 3 of the responsibility unit goes hand in hand with chapter 2 of the respect unit because you're talking about self-respect, and now you have a responsibility to yourself. And this is the application of what we've learned, this education. And it started out by the introduction here by saying, do you know that the choices you make today can affect your future? That was a question we put in the minds of the students. And we're talking about, once again, that although I'm growing up, I must still ask permission from my parents or guardians. And looking down to the last sentence of the second paragraph, it starts out with, the fact is, you cannot do whatever you want to do and not suffer the consequences of your actions. So once again, we can't just go out and do, as we see taking place in society today, doing whatever we want to do. And it's like, oh, how did I get that? Somebody must have gave it to me. Well, sometimes you got to work hard for these things. It's just through stupidity. We always want to blame other people, but we are part of this. Either we're part of the solution or we're part of the problem. But continuing on here, it says, you have an obligation to yourself to continuously seek ways to develop and improve your character. Well, how do you do that? Remember, we just talked about education. Education is something we have to continually do. To do this, you must be accountable for your actions. Notice, accept the advice of those in authority. That's your parents, your guardian, could be an older brother or an older sister that have been left in charge. There's a lot of people that can be that person that you need to be listening to. It could be somebody on the job that is teaching you how to do a job, but we're specifically talking about getting permission from parents and guardians. And we'll get into why here in a second, just to remind ourselves. But once again, accept the advice of those in authority and use self-control to make proper decisions. You must be willing to follow the rules and guidelines that dictate morals and proper conduct. When you hold yourself to a high standard, you are being responsible for the gift of life you have been given. And of course, looking over to page 43, speaking about adolescence, well, this is why we need to continually take the advice, the instructions, and the guidance of our parents or guardians. Notice it says adolescence is that time period between childhood and adulthood that can be frustrating and wonderful all at the same time. Notice it also says that many teens complain of feeling as if they are being pulled in opposite directions. So think about the mentality that we just spoke about in developing it. Think about what it's like to feel like you're growing up, and you see the picture there once again on page 43, where you kind of have that dividing line, and it feels like you're being pulled both ways. And we'll get to the example here shortly. It says, so many teens complain of feeling as if they are being pulled in the opposite direction. On one hand, they are told to act like adults. On the other hand, for their own safety and well-being, they must still be treated like children. So you can only imagine how that feels. I know a lot of you sitting in the auditorium are now adults. You went through that, but we also have a lot of children, young adults in here that are going through that at this time. Well, it says this is one of those ironic aspects of being an adolescent. Although you might not be old enough to be totally independent and make all of your own decisions, you are old enough to be responsible for the decisions you do make and to face the consequences or rewards. So that's something that we always have to remember, that these consequences, if an adult tells us, a parent or guardian tells us not to do something and we do it anyway, we can't look for the guardian to come help me, come save me from myself, come help me because I didn't listen. That takes place a lot. And of course, parents and guardians do their best to try to help those that make mistakes and bad choices. But we should be getting away from those things. We should be where we put education first, morality first, and we should ask before we commit an action. That makes us educated. Remember, that's a positive character trait, to be educated about what we're doing. And that's exactly what it's saying, what it says, although I'm still growing up, I must still ask permission from my parents or guardians, because they're going to have more insight. They're going to have more knowledge. They've lived a little longer. They've experienced a little bit more. So it's always best to get educated, even if it's something, hey, can I go do this? Well, be ready for the answer. It's not always yes. Looking back over to page 60, and here's the second bullet point. It says, being responsible means accepting my parents' guardians' guidance and direction, because they are helping to keep me safe in a world that can be dangerous. So once again, after we ask for that, we need to actually accept the answer. And of course, looking on page 44, no is okay. And I cannot stress how important it is to remember, and you'll see the application of this whenever you're going through it. No is okay is always concerning ownership. Your parents own you as a young adult. If you're not 18, and this is according to the laws here in the United States, different countries have different rules, but your parents own you. You're your own. If you buy a car, you get a title to it, and it's got your name. You have your name on it. Well, when your child's born, you get a birth certificate. You know what's on it? The mom and dad's name, or if they're put there. Usually, in an ideal situation, it has the mother and the father. And they're responsible for you, legally responsible for you, until you're 18 years of age. So if someone was to come and take you at 5 years old, that means they stole you from your parents. Well, why is it considered stealing? Why is kidnapping stealing? Because the child belongs to someone. And that, I only say that because, and when we get into the next book, the Building Moral Excellence Unit, it goes into much more detail about how a person is owned by someone. And we're specifically talking about young adults or children that are 17 or younger, not yet 18, recognized by the law of here in the United States. Your country that you're in, if you're not in the United States, may be a little different. You just have to look and consider. But, here in the United States, we tend to have this 18 is, I'll just say it this way, it's the most magical number on the face of the earth. At 17, you're just not quite there. At 18, the day you turn 18, it's like the cloud of knowing everything just descends upon you. It did me, and then at 18 and a half, I realized I was pretty ignorant. My My father warned me about it, but I didn't really believe him at the time. But I did learn over a period of time. And I say that kind of in jesting, but there's a lot of times it's like when someone turns 16. That's when you get your driver's license and you begin to learn to drive. A lot of young adults at 16 think, oh no, I'm qualified to drive now because I'm 16. Well, 16 is when you get the opportunity to qualify. It doesn't mean you qualified just because you turned 16. But of course, this is part of education. Well, no is okay. Here on page 44. In addition to being accountable for your actions, you must also be humble and accept the correction and advice of your parents, teachers, and other authority figures. By having the right attitude, you can give them an opportunity, notice, to help you make positive decisions. Looking down to the next paragraph, it says, although you're getting older and more independent, there is a lot you don't know, and that's okay. And it is okay because we're going to continue learning things. It's only if we reject knowledge, we reject education, does the problem begin. But if we're willing to learn, as it says here, learning is a lifelong process. To learn, you must have teachers. And remember, your very first teachers are your parents, are your guardians, as we covered many units ago. Ordinarily, you wouldn't think your parents as being your teachers, but they are. In fact, your parents were your first and most influential teachers. Have you ever stopped to consider just how much they've taught you? And of course, looking down to the next paragraph, it says, do you know what the whole purpose of being taught is? And if you didn't underline this when we went through it, underline it, highlight it, circle it, put flashing arrows on it, because this is a quote that we use an enormous amount when we go to schools and teach. And even when we go to different countries, we always ask this question. Do you know what the purpose of being taught is? And you'd be surprised how you just get these blank looks on people's faces. Well, it's a very simple answer. It's so that you can gain knowledge, grow up, become a successful adult, and contribute to society. Now, contribute to society in a positive way. Not be one of the statistics of robbery, or drunk driving, or a homicide or something else. That's not what we're looking to be part of or contribute to society. But, of course, we want to be able to do those things which are positive. Looking down to the next, let's go ahead and finish this one because it's still talking about the parents and guardians. Also, when you have a family of your own, you will be able to care for and teach them. It's important to remember you can only teach what you've learned. And we went through the peaceful solution in detail, talking about racism, for example, is something that's taught. You're not born being racist. You have to teach someone to be racist. Hatred is taught, whether it be a color of skin or of nationalities. These things are taught, and they're usually taught, and it's kind of an oxymoron kind of thing because it's a lack of education that is taught. In other words, somebody teaches stupidity. They teach you how to be uneducated. We'll get in the next chapter we get back into talking about the difference between all of us, no matter what color of skin or nation we're born in. So I don't want to get in that too much because the very next chapter, I think it's the first page of the next chapter actually, we'll get back into that, talking about what we discovered and discussed in the acceptance unit about how similar we are to each other, whether you're someone that's pale white or someone that's very dark colored, brown or black. There's not really much difference. In fact, it's so small, you're talking 0.01. It gets into very small numbers that are so irrelevant that only a person of ignorance would start trying to differentiate value in that, because it doesn't make sense. It's all taught, a lack of education that is taught, that one person is better than another because you're from this country, or you're this color of skin, or you speak this language. You have to be much better now because you do this. And of course, we see people dying every day because of this. But sadly, when we're talking about here, Once again, I'll read this, and I want to put something else in your mind about how ignorant society can be. Do you know what the purpose of being taught is? So that you can gain knowledge, grow up, and be a successful adult. What occurs to those that are taught negative things? What are those that occur that are taught, well, your skin is this color, you're so much better than those people. Those people are cursed. And that can work both ways. You know, whether you're white, black, green, purple, yellow, doesn't matter. I've heard that stupidity, and that's what it is. I'm not being harsh or trying to be argumentative, but that is just stupidity. Anybody that teaches racism teaches stupidity. It's a lack of education. And there's never room for it in our society. Human life is valuable. And we went over that in the very beginning, talking about how all life is valuable. But of course, here we're talking about adults, parents and guardians giving instructions to children, young adults, and this is why it's so important that it be proper education, because we can teach hatred to no end. But continuing on here, it says, although you are given some independence at this time, you must be willing to accept that your parents, guardians have the right to make some decisions for you, as well as decide how much independence you are allowed. Ironically, just at the time when you feel you're ready to test your wings, your parents or guardians are saying, sorry, I can't let you fly yet. The difference of opinion is the foundation for many misunderstandings and arguments between adolescents and their parents. The truth is, the world can be a dangerous place. Because most of the world has not yet learned the peaceful solution, there are many people who commit crimes by raping, killing, and brutalizing young people. In addition, there are also dangers associated with negative conformity and risk-taking behavior that includes experimenting with drugs and, of course, premarital sex. So when you, let's go ahead and continue on with this next one, because once again, we're talking about getting this instruction, being guided by parents, making a safer world, helping us through the dangers in life. And continuing on here on page 45, it says, being responsible to yourself means being able to consider the viewpoints of those who care for and are in charge of you. Yes, in charge of you. Now, the author of The Peaceful Solution, he would say many times that the word, when someone said in charge, he goes, I think that people, they distort that term. It's better that they say I'm responsible for than I'm in charge of this. In charge, sometimes I'm the one, you do what I say. Well, responsible for means when somebody does something wrong, you can't go, well, I'm in charge, but I didn't do it. No, if you're in charge, you're also responsible if it went wrong. You have to guide, lead, help. Those are things that are responsible. So once again here, those you take, you're in charge of you, are responsible for you. What you might interpret as your parents or guardians raining on your parade, and I've also heard it described other ways in schools, is instead their love for you and their concern for your health and safety. Seeing another person's viewpoint requires self-control. You have to stop and think and put yourself in their shoes. And make sure when you say that, you should have a side note there. What does that mean to put yourself in their shoes? Well, of course, it's empathy. That's the exact example that we give of empathy, is putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Looking down to the third paragraph, it starts off by saying most parents, guardians, take their job of parenting very seriously. Sadly, that's not the case in every situation, but most parents do. I've met people that have next to nothing, and the most important thing to them is raising their children, and a lot of them just want to know how. They just want a better way. They would love for someone to give them something that is there. And, that's the biggest problem we have in the Peaceful Solution right now, is getting the information in all the languages that are being requested. That's our greatest challenge right now. We recently have, we have it in Spanish, we have it in French. Now we have requests for Russian. We're putting it in Japanese. But getting it out there where people can use it A lot of people, of course, they'll translate, just Google Translate these books and get it across, but they want to be able to have classes. They want someone to be able to give them instructions, to guide them, to not just give them the book, but show them how to use the book. And that's why it's extremely important for us to educate ourselves, because there's a lot of people that want to be part of this. They want to learn. And these are adults that are asking for guidance because they want to be better for their children. They want the world to change because they see the world, as the author used to say, it's going to hell in a handbasket. And it's getting worse every day. Well, this education is how we do it. And many parents do take this job seriously, and they're looking for that tool. Well, continuing on, it says they want to protect their children from harm and danger. Of course, there are always exceptions to the rules. There are some parents, guardians, who are negligent and abusive and do not give proper guidance to their children, but we will discuss this in the next section, and that's what we'll get into. It says, overall, parents or guardians are really not trying to cramp your style, keep you from growing or having fun. They're just trying to teach and protect you so that someday when you become an adult and can make all of your own decisions, you will be able to make the right ones. Once again, we have to be educated. And at the very bottom of the page, it says, just remember that although the word no can be disappointing, no is okay, especially when it comes from those who are in charge or those who are responsible for you and are protecting you so that you can grow and be healthy in mind and body. And once again, well, why do they have the authority to tell me no? Well, it's because you belong to them. They're responsible for you. If someone wanted to do something and the parent knew it was going to hurt them, and they tell them, hey, can I touch that burner on the stove? You can, yeah. Go ahead. That's child abuse. That's actually a crime. So obviously we have to see here that there's reasons for this. And there's reasons that no must be said. Sometimes it's not as obvious as taking our hand and putting it on the burner of the stove and getting burnt. Sometimes it's not that obvious at all. In fact, sometimes doing the wrong thing looks really nice. It looks really fun. It looks like it'd even be beneficial. But once you get burnt really bad from whatever it is that you do that you think, well, I guess I should have asked somebody that knew. Well, that does help, but you know what? It doesn't change the situation, and it won't remove the consequences of the actions. So with that in mind, turn back over to page 60, to the third bullet point here. It says, it is important to recognize the difference between positive and negative conformity. I owe it to myself to choose only those things that are positive, because negative conformity can lead me susceptible to risky behavior that can change my life for the worst. And once again, we've talked about these decisions that are made and how these things really, once they get into the body, it's almost like you have this bright white shirt, and it's so beautiful. You just love your bright white shirt. You go have pasta or spaghetti and you spill the whole plate on it, and I don't care how much bleach you use, you can never get it white again. Well, that's kind of bad, because you got to walk around with a stain on your shirt. But it's better to walk around with a stain on your shirt than a disease inside your body that you can't get out. No matter what you do, no matter how much you want it out, it's there. And you know what? When diseases are in our body and they're there and you can't get them out, they're not helping you. They're destroying you. They make us sick. They make us feel unwell. They cause us to not have the full potential that we were created to have. It's just like having a car that, that's supposed to have 8 spark plugs and somebody's only got 7 in there that's working and the last one just don't work right. It makes a huge difference in the efficiency of the vehicle, whether it's working right or not. And for women, you could talk about, the most frustrating thing that I learned to deal with when I was very young, that women do a lot, is sew. And if you've ever used a sewing machine, and I got to where, because of my business, I had to learn to take them apart and put them back together. If a sewing machine is not absolutely perfect in timing, it won't work. Everything just falls apart. It has to be absolutely perfect Because a sewing machine is nothing but a device that ties knots. That's all it does. And it ties knots very fast. And if those knots aren't tied properly, they fall apart. Well, that's what occurs in our bodies whenever we're allowing these things to negative conformity is like something that is not timed properly or not set properly. It actually breaks us down. And looking over to page 47, and of course on page 46, just so you have it for your notes, and that way you've referenced it, what if I live in an abusive family? Make sure that you put in your somewhere on that page, chapter 2 of the character unit, because that's where we talked about abuse in the family and dysfunctionality in families. And that ties hand in hand with the character unit. We don't really have time to go back, and I'm sure that was covered when we went through these classes, pulling these things back in between myself, David, Catan, and William. But you want to make sure you have that there because that ties in hand with chapter 2 of the character unit. But on page 47, we have the ups and downs of conformity, and of course, remembering what conformity is. And I'll never forget the time we were given an example of conformity in Laredo, Texas, and Catan used the example of a sock, and they all just caught on so quickly how your sock is flat, you get it out of the drawer, but when you put it on your foot, it conforms to the shape of your foot. And you could just see the minds of people, yeah, and that helped a lot because you've seen how everybody in the classroom got that. It wasn't where some people understood it, some people didn't. Everybody got it, and we found that that's one of the best examples of conformity. There's many others you can use, but when you're talking to a classroom full of students, or even someone in a different country in a language you can't speak, I know it's a proven fact you can still get people to understand it. It's something that is just universal, and it helps a lot when you can connect with people like that. But it says here, developing responsibility toward yourself also includes being aware of who your friends are and what you're willing to conform to. And remember, to conform is to change your behavior and attitude to be in agreement with certain standards or customs. And looking down to the next paragraph, it says conformity is part of human nature, and there are many examples of conformity within society. The clothing, music, and automotive industries, just to name a few, make billions of dollars each year because they market to our need to conform. They make it appear through commercials and magazines that everyone is buying certain products, getting certain hairstyles, and driving certain cars. And if you don't conform to these standards, you'll stick out like a sore thumb. Well, the scientists that are coming out with the syphilis outbreak right now in Texas are trying to get people to conform too. The only problem is they're trying to say, go get a checkup. Get yourself a checkup so you'll know whether you got this. And if you do, go get yourself a shot. Oh, we don't have enough shots, by the way. So wait for your shot, but at least get yourself scheduled. You would think somebody would finally stand up and go, this is what causes it. Don't do it. This is what's causing the outbreak. And I sat back because I have read a lot of the information put out by physicians, and I have yet to find one piece of documentation where they're saying don't do what's causing it, which to me is mind-blowing. Everybody says you need to go get screened, you need to go get tested, and if you test positive, you need to go get an antibiotic, and we're running short on antibiotics, so you need to go get in line soon. But nobody is saying stop doing what's taking place. Now, that's a society. Remember what we're talking about here, the importance between positive and negative conformity. Looking over, because we only got 10 minutes left, looking over to look down at the bottom of page 47, because it says, just what does negative conformity have to do with being responsible to myself? And that's what we're talking about here. That's what the whole chapter is about, is being responsible for ourselves. It says, sometimes our need to fit in can lead to making choices that can result in regrets. Remember, some forms of conformity are negative. Negative conformity can be harmful, dangerous, and even life-threatening. One of the most positive forms of negative conformity is called negative peer pressure. And of course, that's speaking when someone tries to get you. We talked about the drugs, the alcohol, oh, here, come over here. Everybody's doing this. Everybody out here, everybody's having sex in school. Yeah, everybody's doing it. No, everybody's not doing it. And I remember when I was in school, someone telling me everybody's doing drugs. And I laughed. I literally laughed so hard because everybody would included me. And I was scared to death of drugs. And I can't even tell you why I was scared of drugs. I have no idea why I was scared. It wasn't because of the just say no policy that they were running at the time. I can tell you that. That had nothing to do with it. But it just was something I didn't even want to touch the stuff. I didn't want to be around the stuff. I seen a lot of it, but I didn't want it around me. It was kind of like being around a loaded gun when you don't know how to use one. No, just get that away from me. I don't want it. Don't want nothing to do with it. Of course, it probably was a lot of seeing my friends destroy their lives. Most of them are dead now. Most of them didn't make it to 30, much less 50, because they destroyed their lives with what they did and the drugs they took. They didn't stand up for what was right. Didn't even have the desire to, I don't think, sometimes. But looking over to page 48 here at the very bottom in the center paragraph, it says, conformity in the form of peer pressure is said to be negative when friends influence each other to make immoral choices. Remember, morals are rules, and immoral choice is a choice that is against the rule. So an immoral choice is one that does not show respect for yourself, others, property, or the environment. And that's why it's so important to tie this back into chapter 2 of the respect unit, where you talk about self-respect. Because that's really what we're talking about here, is being responsible for showing respect to yourself. Also continuing, it says, negative peer pressure can sometimes be very subtle. And it gives an example. At the very bottom it says, on other occasions, peer pressure can be very bold. It can take the form of dares, teasing, harassment. Whether subtle or bold, negative peer pressure can lead to danger. One of the most popular places you'll see that on a school level, most of the time it's a collegiate level, is hazing, where people, you have to do this to get in. You have to do that to get in. And every year you read about young adults dying. And this is at an age to where parents are letting them go. Okay, you're 18. You're out of high school now. It's time to go off to college. It's time for you to, now we're going to let you fly. Well, some of them crash. Before they even get off the ground, they crash. And as teachers, I would hope everyone, especially if you're a high school teacher, go through what takes place with this hazing and show them what's taking place so they'll have an idea of what's going on. Also looking over too with building about how these things can make us susceptible. Negative conformity can leave us susceptible to risky behaviors that can change our lives for the worse. Looking over to pages 50 and 51, of course you had the let's take a closer look section. Talking about immoral means to go against what is right. You notice there on the very top of the left-hand page. And it gets into even impulsive over on the right-hand side. And that's something that we usually enjoy teaching in school, because you can ask someone, what is an impulsive choice? You do something without thinking. Now, let me ask you, is that true? Do you ever do something without thinking? No? Yes? No, you don't. You have to think about it. And sometimes the thoughts are very quickly, but we like to, that's one way we try to not be responsible for our choices. We can say, I don't know what I was thinking. That could be actually true when we do some things. But to say, didn't even think about that. Sometimes our minds slip. But when we do certain actions, of course, impulsively, it might be a very quick process, but every action begins with a thought. That's just a scientific fact. And notice here on page 50, it's on the right-hand side. You see the word impulsively there in bold letters. It says, will this cause me any regrets? Just one bad choice can change your life forever. Avoid acting impulsively, that is, without thought of consequences. Very important, without thought or consideration of consequences. Don't just do something because everyone else is doing it. Stop and think about your life, future, goals, how they will be affected. That's what we want to consider. And of course, the next paragraph you see it says, can this result in harm or death to me or someone else? This is what we're evaluating. And then over to the next page, you see you have the other side of the coin, and that's getting into the positive conformity and how it can help me be responsible to myself. Looking back over here to page 60, because we went through the negative, so let's look back over to page 60. The fourth point, it says, I'm responsible. So here we have something positive. I am responsible for my own health and well-being. Therefore, I will not purposely risk hurting myself, nor will I take drugs or engage in premarital sex, because all of these are risky behaviors which can leave me with regrets. And we just talked about those regrets. And of course, that term, a lot of William talked about this, where people, they don't like hearing that term premarital. Well, that sounds religious. Well, it's not really. You have to find a way to put it in the curriculum. You have to define it, and there's some kind of term you have to use for it. You could say promiscuous, but there are people that are married that are promiscuous. So there's a lot of things you have to do to try to get the idea of your building. And when you're building a family unit, that usually starts with the thought of marriage. And that's why we define these things in a certain way, because we're trying to get a picture in the mind of building things and accomplishing things and growing things. And that's why all of these words are used, and that's why we're putting them in a certain way. But if you look back on page 49, you see that you had the negative peer pressure that can also lead to drugs, alcohol, and abuse and premarital sex. But these are things that we're standing up for, that we're not going to give into, that we're going to make the right choice. We're going to do the right thing. So the positive side, the being responsible, if you look over to page 51, the other side of the coin, and it says, how does positive conformity help me to be responsible to myself? Well, of course, we just took a closer look, and we talked about how we can evaluate by asking ourselves questions, by going through our situation, by looking and considering what's being done. But notice here it says, when you are able to choose positive conformity, you put yourself in the best position to have a successful life. That's very important, because we all want to succeed. Nobody wants to start life by, I just want to be a failure. That's what I want to do. I don't know of anybody that says that. Now, people fail in life, and even if you're a positive person and you have positive goals, realistic goals, well, you still can fail at certain things. Doesn't mean the world has come to an end, but we're talking about with character. And it's very important that we define it that way. We're talking about things developing character, morality. So notice it says, just as there is positive conformity, there's also positive peer pressure. Having positive friends who have self-respect, avoid risky behavior, and demonstrate compassion for others will help you to make responsible choices as well. So the negativity goes into the irresponsibility. The positivity goes into the responsibility. And of course, the results we see are either rewards or consequences. Continuing on, it says, in fact, if you surround yourself with people who make moral choices, you too will be more likely to do the same. Individuals who are responsible know the difference between positive and negative conformity, and then choose to conform to that which is positive. And then, of course, here we have positive conformity, and what is positive conformity? And notice here in the very first one it says, it will help you to demonstrate respect for life, property, and the environment. And remember what positive character is. We went over that in the page 8 of the character unit, actually. Also, it will help you to build positive character. It will present opportunities to be honest, responsible, respectful, and compassionate, and then so on. At the very bottom of the page, it says positive conformity has the potential to help you build integrity. And remember integrity, that's on the page 18 of the character unit. I should have put that in my notes here. Remember, it means to openly show what is internalized. It's there, what you have. If you can think about the knowledge that we've gained so far, and that's what we've been doing, when we actually take what we've gained and we have it internalized and we show it openly through our actions, we become a person of integrity. But notice here it says, be determined to develop responsibility to yourself by making moral choices regardless of what the crowd is doing. Even if you lose a few friends, at first, in time, you will make new friends who will, like you, are trying to develop positive characters. Others will respect your courage and determination to make the right choice, but most of all, you will respect yourself. Let's look over the page. Well, we're going to stop right there. That way we can give Catan a part to pick up on. So we're going to be on the next bullet point that's entitled, I must also be responsible about my feelings in regard to the opposite sex. So that's the 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the fifth point. Catan's going to pick up on the fifth point of what I have learned here on page 60, the next class. And the next class is going to be March the 3rd. It will be this coming Sunday at 5:30 p.m. So once again, thank you all for joining us, and we'll look to conclude this chapter and get into the next chapter of the next class. Thank you.